Hi everybody, Ros Williams here, the Associate Director of the Digital Good Network. We'll just give it a few more moments because I can see a few people are starting to enter the room. Hi all, I see a few more people are joining us. It's 1 minute past now, so I'll give it another 30 seconds and then I'll get started. Okay, Daniel, could you flip over to the next slide, please? Brilliant, thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name's Ros Williams, and I'm the Associate Director of the ESRC-funded Digital Good Network. And it's a pleasure to have some of you here today. I see that we've got people still joining us. So I'm conscious of that as we begin, that the event will be recorded. So today's session is an information session, as you can see here, about our research internship scheme, which is a new scheme that we've launched as part of our Digital Good Network, which is itself a new initiative. So what I'm going to do today is, and we've got about an hour and 45 minutes with a break included in the middle, is talk a little bit about the research internship scheme and give you a bit of context for the Digital Good Network too as part of that. Then we're really fortunate to be joined by 3 different organisations who are going to be some of the partner organisations who can facilitate different kinds of internships for people who apply through this scheme. Then we're going to talk to some people who've actually done internships themselves, who either have just finished them or maybe did last year, or actually are in the middle of doing them in the case of one of our panelists as well. So what I'd like first of all to do and you will have an opportunity to ask questions too. First of all I'd like to do is just speak a little bit about the housekeeping for the next session. So Daniel, if we could just flip the slide forward. I think we've missed a slide there, Daniel, sorry. It should be a housekeeping slide, I'm not sure. Yeah, fantastic, thank you. So just to let everybody know, the event will be recorded. So I can see a number of people in the room now, and there will be some folks who are joining us at our summer school as well, who I'll give a better shout out to shortly. But what we're going to be doing here is recording this entire session and putting it on our website. So you don't need to frantically write down notes here. This will be a resource that you can revisit. And equally, we've heard from folks today who are really interested in the scheme but can't attend. So this is a resource for them to be able to use. If you have questions, it's not going to be disruptive just to put them in the Q&A box in the function on Zoom as and when you have them. We'll be able to come back to them at the Q&A session toward the end of the hour and 3/4. So as I say, if you have questions, feel free to pop them in there. That's absolutely fine. And the other thing I would just like to mention, and I think it's important to mention this, and we are doing throughout the rest of the events this week that Digital Good Network are involved in, is that there is currently ongoing University and Colleges Union industrial action. So there is actually at this very moment a marking and assessment boycott. So the members of the Digital Good Network management team do want to acknowledge the marking and assessment boycott, which is part of a very long-term ongoing industrial action over pay, working conditions and pensions in the higher education sector in the UK. So because of the nature of the current boycott affecting certain staff and the severity of the punitive pay deductions being quite diverse across institutions, we are going to move ahead with this event and the rest of our summer school this week. But I would just quickly like to acknowledge our university's position on the boycott, which is to adopt 100% of pay for marking of any of our colleagues who have elected not to undertake marking and assessment, which is obviously not 100% of their role, leaving them effectively locked out of their jobs. So on behalf of this event's organisers, I'm sending solidarity to them and all of our colleagues across the sector as we continue our fight. So on to the next slide, if I may please, Daniel. The ESRC Digital Good Network, at the core of what we're trying to do is build a research community, which is focused basically on what a digital society should look like when it's good, and how it is that we actually get there, how we operationalize that notion of the good. And so basically it's partly work of defining the good together through all of our schemes, but also about trying to enable elements of that good through the work that we do together. Part of that, we believe, is through bringing together various different disciplines and sectors. So as part of the Digital Good Network, we are partnering with different organisations, including Zinc VC and BBC R&D, who are named in the network. And we have a huge college of experts. And part of that is CAST, who is another organisation who's joining us today. But as part of our team, we also include amongst ourselves computer scientists, designers, sociologists, media and communication scholars and psychologists. So there's a real range of disciplines amongst us. And what we want to try and do is bring those disciplines, but also draw in others too through the work we're doing. So through doing that, what it is we're trying to achieve here is developing this research community. In part, that's through funding research ourselves. So we're a £4 million investment by the ESRC, which is part of UKRI, UKRI, you may have heard of. And part of what we do is distribute those funds outward. One of those mechanisms is the Digital Good Research Fund. The first round of that is actually just closed, and we'll soon be announcing the first awardees of that scheme. We're also going to be from next year launching a Digital Good Research Fellowship scheme. And then in addition to that, what we're talking about today, the Research Internship scheme, which is aimed primarily at PhD students or PGR students. In addition, we're providing training, including a summer school. So this is where I'm going to give a shout out. Somewhere downstairs in the building I'm in right now, there are 20 or so, hopefully, students who have all come to spend the next 2 days together talking about their research and learning from one another. And hopefully a lot of them are watching this right now. So hello to all of the summer school students. We're also hosting different events and trying to engage different kinds of stakeholders in this conversation as we go along. If I could just go to the next slide then, please, Daniel. So, well, I think maybe we've just missed another one again, sorry. Well, maybe not. There should be one here about 3 societal challenges. Can you flick onto the next one? Yeah, there we go. Sorry, they seem to have gone a bit askew. So just very quickly, what we are trying to organise our work around is there's 3 different societal challenges. These are equity. So we're interested in how digital relationships take place in conditions of power asymmetry and structural inequity. Resilience, because individual and collective well-being, wellness, coping strategies in the face of pandemics, political conflicts, natural disasters, digital misinformation, the list goes on. They matter in digital relationships and for our realization of the digital good. And thirdly, sustainability, because planetary challenges like climate change, of course, demand that we consider whether our digital relationships are indeed sustainable. So the reason I mentioned those 3 challenges, if we could just flip back, Daniel, to that previous slide, is that what we're trying to do is encourage people to engage in pieces of work over the course of a 3-month period that address at least one of those challenges. So you can learn more about how you might be able to make those links through looking at the Digital Good Network website. But in essence, what we're trying to do through this particular internship scheme that we've met to talk about today is invite applicants that will, applications that will allow you as a PhD student to do a piece of work, a discrete package of work over the course of 3 months, working ideally in an interdisciplinary team or in a particular sector that perhaps you're not all that familiar with, or an industry that you've never really even considered working in before. The idea is that you will get some experience of doing that kind of work, taking you outside of the university setting and really exposing yourself to different ways of working, ways of knowing and doing. And the idea there is that through the skills you'll develop, you're becoming part of that broader research network that we're trying to build. So the internships themselves that you undertake, a 3-month internship, it might be a more kind of academic looking research project. You could think to your own PhD, for example, that you probably wrote a proposal about with a discrete set of research questions and methods that you employed to answer those. Perhaps it will be something quite neatly packaged like that. Or equally, it might be something a little bit more, less structured, that allows in some other way to allow you to support industry-based technology development in the workplace specifically that you're working in. So we're not trying to be very prescriptive. Now, obviously people are like, is this going to be valid to do an internship? Is this, perhaps we haven't got time in the Q&A to answer specific questions about that. If you do have questions, then obviously you can get in touch with us through our website and our email address to ask those questions. But in the main, what we're trying to convey to you is that there are a lot of things that could potentially map onto the kinds of stuff that we're trying to fund, the kinds of internships that we want to support. If you go on the website, you'll see a few examples as well. And ideally, of course, we'll be speaking to a few interns today who've done things that do map onto some of the stuff the Digital Good Network is interested in. In your application, you'll need to be able to explain, as I say, how it supports your own development, but also how it maps onto the aims of our network and those 3 societal challenges. You don't have to map onto all of them, but being able to articulate in some way how it's pertinent to what you want to do is important. So we go to the next slide then, please, Daniel. And the next one after that. I should just mention that on that previous slide, no need to go back, we are funding people £6,000 over a 3-month period. That's important to remember, right? So that's about £2,000 a month. You can go onto our website and find out how it is we'll distribute that money over the time period and the more practical arrangements of that. That gives you a sense of the kind of support you'd be able to receive to do the work that you do over this internship period. So who then is it for? This year, specifically, it's only for PhD students who have completed their upgrade by the application deadline of the 29th of September. And the reason we're doing that is because we want people to have a relatively good punt at starting off their PhD and making some good headway and foundational work on that, so that when they necessarily have to take a leave of absence, which is another one of the requirements, they're able to do so and then come back to a project that's ready to go. So it's in essence to make sure that it's not too disruptive to you for your studies. So we believe in your 2nd or 3rd year is probably an ideal time to be doing something like this. As I say, this year, the rules are that we need you to be based at a UK higher education institute that is eligible for UCRI funding. You don't need to know exactly what that list is. If you go on the Digital Good Network website and click on the link, you can see the full list there. And the likelihood is that your university will be on that list, but it is worth a check. And as it's always important to note here, particularly because, of course, one of our main challenges here is around equity and the work that we're trying to do. That also infuses the work that we do as a team. We're really very keen to incorporate and to encourage applications from groups that are currently underrepresented. So by that, we mean racial and ethnic minorities, people who have gender and sexual identity minorities, disability, age, all of those sorts of things. All things to remember when you're putting together an application and articulating why it is that you will be able to help to diversify our community, which is also part of the application form. So very quickly, I've only got a few minutes left. So if we could go to the next slide, please, Daniel. It's over 2 stages, essentially. So the first stage, there are 2 different routes you could take. The first one is to engage with one of our partner organisations, that is Zinc VC, CAST, or BBC Research and Development. So those 3 organisations are speaking today, and they'll tell you a little bit about the kinds of things they do. The point here is to engage with them, tell them what you're interested in, how you see yourself slotting in there, and you can perhaps organise to have a conversation with them if they feel that you're a good fit. Alternatively, you can identify your own organisation. That perhaps takes a little bit of time for you to locate the organisation, get in touch with them and broker a conversation with them. But it is important to let them know, of course, that this is ESRC funded and it would fund you for that time period. You can go again onto the website to find out a bit more about our expectations for hosts. So you can either contact one of our partner hosts or get in touch with one of your own individual hosts. And then onto stage 2, if we can go to the next slide, Daniel. The next slide is to complete the application form. So collaborating with your host is important here, just so it's clear that what you're writing about what you'll do is something that you actually could physically do or practically do in that time period that you work with the organisation. So if we flick forward, Daniel, just to kind of give you a sense of the questions that we will ask on the application form, we're going to invite a summary of the proposed activities over the internship period. So that could be, I don't know, the kinds of things that you will ask, the questions that you will ask through the research that you do, the kinds of activities that you will get up to. So, for example, I will be spending my time evaluating this product. That could be something you do, and you could describe how you'd go about doing that. Here, you'd also need to articulate some of the kinds of things that your host would be able to do to support you, whether that's to give you desk space for the time you're doing the research, or whether it's, for example, to fund the transcription of interviews that you might do for that piece of work. In addition, listing any output, so it might be a report, a prototype, or something like that that might come out of the internship period. Another question that we're going to be asking is how the internship will benefit you as an individual, right? So we're thinking there again about capacity building. So all of these underlying things are how we're going to be assessing the application. Each criterion is measured against each of those boxes in the application form. So articulating why this will benefit you, how this pushes you, how this develops your skill set. And then finally, how do these activities relate to the Digital Good Network and the wider digital society more broadly? So we're asking you here to articulate that fit with those specific areas that we're interested in: resilience, equity, and sustainability. So I've come to 15 minutes past. I'm impressed with myself for getting that done in that time. I'm going to flick forward to the next slide, if I may, please, Daniel. If you've got any more information, any more questions about this, you can ask them in the Q&A, but there isn't time to go through all of this right now. So if you go onto the Digital Good Network website, to opportunities and then to internships, there's tons of information there that our fantastic colleagues, Ruth and Dee, have been putting together, that you can read more about this scheme there. And there may be questions there, answers there to the questions you've got. Ruth's put fantastically a little internship link in the chat there, so you can have a look at it. If we flick onto the next slide, please, Daniel. What I'm going to do now is hand over to our internship host speakers. So these are 3 of the organisations that you could speak to, that you could work with if you apply through the processes and channels elaborated on the website for your internship. I'm not sure if these are in the right order. So the first slide is from, bear with me just one moment. Is actually from BBC. So I'm sorry, flip this back to front. So we're actually going to hand over to Ria Jones now, who works at BBC R&D, and she is going to elaborate for the next 10 minutes or so what BBC R&D does and give you a sense of the flavour of the work that interns do there. So Ria, over to you.
Thanks, Raz. Great. Yeah, I'm Rianne Jones, and I lead the Responsible Innovation in Society team in BBC Research and Development, and we are really excited to be hosting an intern in collaboration with the Digital Good Network. So in the next 10 minutes, what I'd like to do is just introduce you to BBC R&D, so who we are and what we do, why we exist, talk a bit about our internship programme at the BBC, and then I'm going to sort of end by spotlighting some areas of ongoing work in the department where there are research opportunities and challenges that we think align very well with the Digital Good Network themes and goals. So next slide, please. Thank you. So BBC R&D, if you haven't heard of us, we are the research and development arm of the BBC. So we're the future-facing part of the BBC's larger technology, innovation and product division. And under the Charter, our remit is to ensure that the BBC conducts research and development activities that are geared towards the fulfilment of the mission, the BBC's mission, and the promotion of the public purposes, and which aim to maintain the BBC's leading role in research and development in broadcasting and other means of distribution and consumption of content and related technologies. And that related technologies is actually becoming more and more important in terms of the work that we do. Next slide, please. So as I've said, we exist to research and develop technologies for the BBC, but importantly, it's also for the wider media industry and creative sector, working in service to UK audiences and wider society. We've been around now nearly as long as the BBC, not quite 100 years. I think we're about 93 years we've been around. And we play an increasingly important role in supporting and shaping the BBC's mission and ambitions in a digital age. And our work is quite varied. So it spans innovation in sort of broadcast infrastructure and distribution, right through to thinking about new media services, formats and experiences. And we do a lot of research to understand the wider challenges and opportunities technology and innovation present for media organisations like the BBC and our audiences in a very rapidly changing digital world. So just to give you a bit of flavour as to the department, R&D is made up of about 200 plus people, and it spans people from a range of different disciplines, from engineering to computer science, HCI and design, and increasingly the social sciences and arts and humanities. And that's an area that I'm very passionate about in terms of increasing representation, because we know just how important the arts and humanities and social sciences are when it comes to responsible tech innovation. As a department, we're very open, inclusive and collaborative, and we work constantly sort of in close collaboration with our colleagues across the organisation and also with industry and academia to explore new areas, to problem solve, and to apply our knowledge to support world-class innovation in the media and creative sector. So next slide, please. That's great. So we've had a long-standing sort of internship program as a sort of research and development division. As I say, we work quite closely with universities and our academic partners. And our internships are typically focused on either sort of researching and or developing technologies. But this can take many, many shapes and many different forms. Our internships are really designed to give you the opportunity to apply your research expertise and skills to real-world opportunities, problems and challenges in the media sector, whilst also getting some real-world experience of what it's like to work in these environments. And on the flip side, we get the opportunity to bring in new perspectives, ideas, and different types of domain expertise into our work and into our problem spaces. So what's it like to do a research internship at the BBC? Well, I've said before, there isn't a standard format, and it can really vary according to the project that we co-design together. So like I would encourage anyone to get in contact early on if they've got an idea, because it's very beneficial to have those conversations just to sort of shape it up. So it's a good fit. But it could be a single research project or activity for the 3 months, or it could be a collaboration of activities on a particular topic or theme, or it could even be just being more embedded in a project that's already ongoing in the department. It's whatever really works best for the PhD researcher, their sort of project interest and some of the priorities that's going on at any one time. In the past, my team has hosted research placements on a wide range of topics, such as responsible development of AI, public attitudes to data use in the media, could be the editorial impacts of recommendation systems, or co-designing participatory media with local communities. And in relation to the more sort of technical work that goes on in the department, some of our previous interns have looked at working on projects such as flexible or adaptive media formats, thinking about sort of new opportunities in relation to things like data-driven journalism, working with the News Labs division in R&D, or also thinking about how to develop machine learning and AI for things like translation and subtitling services, which is really, really important in terms of our sort of remit around sort of universality and inclusion. So there's a real wide mix. That's the sort of message I wanted to get across. There's lots of different work going on, and regardless of the sort of disciplinary background that you're coming from, there's opportunities within the department to shape up a project. So what we're really looking for from an internship is good alignment between sort of your interest, knowledge and experience, and perhaps that's, you know, bound up with your PhD project and what you're currently working on, and some of the things that we as the BBC are interested in terms of our ongoing work and ambitions. And with a focus on understanding and advancing notions of the digital good and what that would mean or look like in a BBC context in relation to the BBC's sort of role and values. So as an intern, you'll have the opportunity to work alongside my team and wider colleagues in the BBC in ways that hopefully can inform and feed into this work as it progresses. Next slide, please. Okay, so some of our areas of interest and focus. This is a really hard one to crunch down into a couple of minutes, so this is going to be super high level, but hopefully we'll give you a bit of a flavour of the type of things that we do. R&D really has been around and sort of shaping technologies for sort of 90 years, and many of these you'll sort of know and use daily. But today we operate in a digital online environment that's very different to the broadcast one that we started out in. We're part of a complex online interactive digital ecosystem made up of multiple devices, modalities and tech platforms. And this comes with a lot of new challenges and opportunities for the BBC. So R&D is focused on understanding these developments in order to think about how we can sort of work with technology to sort of design and deliver beneficial digital services for future generations. As I've mentioned before, services that are universally available, accessible, and support the BBC in terms of how it delivers its purpose on the internet. So it's an exciting time to be part of R&D, and it's an exciting time to come and do an internship. If you do apply, you'll be supported by the Responsible Innovation and Society team, and we sit in the audience research team of R&D, and we share a focus with the Digital Good Network on seeking to understand the relationships between people and digital technologies, with a view to ensure that what we do is delivers sort of social value and socially beneficial from a public service media in a wider societal point of view. So what are some of the things that we're actually looking at the moment? I tried to condense this into some thematics, but I've ended up posing these as a couple of questions just to open up the conversation. But how do we as an organisation think about promoting greater digital inclusion, especially at a time when there's growing digital divides? What are the opportunities for leveraging new technologies to support new types of civic or democratic or cultural participation online? How do we support responsible data practices or responsible AI practices in industry, ensuring that key values such as our editorial values are built into these data-driven systems and reflected in product design? How do we support sustainability when increasingly we're using data and energy-intensive technologies? How can we innovate to help us understand and demonstrate value and impact in a digital age beyond things like engagement measures? So all of these sort of questions map onto sort of ongoing and live sort of project areas within R&D. And we'd be very open to talking to you more about how anything you might be interested in might sort of map onto some of these areas. So to wrap up, because I haven't been very good at keeping track of time, if you're interested in applying for one of these internships, and I really do hope that you are, have a think about the challenges and opportunities relating to your research, relation to the digital good, and some of the things that I've talked about today. Do have a look at the BBC R&D website, which has a little bit more information on some of the topic areas that we're working on. Although I will put that with a caveat that it's not always up to date, and there's actually lots more going on under the hood, and get in contact if you want to speak more. And on that note, I think I'll wrap up and hand over to our next speaker.
Thanks, Ria. That was brilliant. There's always a lot more going on under the hood, isn't there? Right, our next speaker is Dan Such, and he comes from CAST. I'm going to pass right over to you, Dan, so you've got your full 10 minutes. You go ahead.
Amazing. Thanks, Ross. That was Ria. That was a brilliant presentation. I'm very excited. I wish I could come and join your team for a bit. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. Dan, if you jump to the next slide, please. I am Dan. I lead a charity called CAST. We used to be called the Centre for the Acceleration of Social Technology. That's a stupid name, so we're now just called CAST. But we were set up as a charity specifically to help other social and civic organisations figure out how to use digital in their work, how to use design and data, and particularly how to respond to the changes in the communities they're working with to ensure that their work kind of meets the needs, behaviours and expectations of communities across the UK. Charities and civil society organisations that we work with are thinking about how to create social good all the time through their work, whether it's their existing practice or how they can improve their practice. And digital fitting into that is a significant part of the work right now. They're constantly thinking about what role can digital play in helping them bring about social good. So the question of what is digital good, for me, is at the heart of many charities and civil society organisations' work. And at CAST as a charity, our belief is that when civil society organisations are more influential, things are better. And so as an organisation, we work to accelerate the agency. That means helping civil society organisations develop the skills, the capability, the understanding, the relationships to use digital well in their work. We work to help accelerate their presence in technology. That means them creating their own technologies that work well with their values for their communities and with their communities. And we work to accelerate the influence of civil society organisations in all aspects of technology. That means helping civil society have a greater voice and influence beyond the sector, so that the values of civil society, of communities across the UK, are felt within technologies that affect us all. You can jump to the next slide, please, Daniel. As part of our work, we work with tens of thousands of charities every year. One of the main ways we do that is through a network called The Catalyst. The URL is on the slide there. And Catalyst is a growing network of 500 or so digital agencies, freelancers and individuals who bring digital skills and expertise to the sector, supporting about 20,000 charities who are trying to understand how to use digital in their work to bring about good and to mitigate harms. All trying to kind of figure out together how else we can organise to bring about digital good, to bring about good through digital. So the main proposition or the main offer from CAST as a charity is a connection to existing civil society organisations, whether that's charities, community businesses or social enterprises, who are beginning to think about digital or who are already using it within their work to bring about good, to bring about their social charitable objectives. And so rather than kind of talking about what it might look like or what sorts of questions we're asking, because they are huge across this network, what I'd like to do is kind of share some of the sites that you could join, some of the places for research and insights that you can explore with us to bring any questions that you want to ask. And what I mean by that is I'm going to talk through some of the kind of the live things that we're doing. And I'd love you to be thinking about what questions you could ask of the communities or within the work that we're currently doing that might help you answer the questions you're looking to through this internship. So Dan, if you can jump to the next slide, please. I'm going to rattle through some of this quite quickly because as such a large network, there's so much going on. But between, as an example, is a network of over 100 digital leaders. That means people within civil society organizations that have responsibility for digital within their work. Now, very often they don't have much support within the organization to figure out what good digital practice looks like, or how to use new technologies, or how to kind of make sense of emerging technologies. So we run a network of 100 or so people who are constantly kind of coming together as peers to share their practice, to learn, to share resources and tools, and to use that to go back into their own charities, their own civil society organizations to improve their work. As a site for learning, we have people who are committed to understanding what digital good looks like, people who are practically doing it day to day, and who are already coming together as a group, asking questions and looking for answers. So it might be a place to ask questions, to join in that community, to think about a way of sensing their understanding and needs. Fuse is an accelerator program that we run with established nonprofits. And accelerator programs are about creating new products and services quickly so you can test them with real people. It uses the kind of models that startups use that are kind of known, I'm sure, quite well. But they intentionally kind of fuse those startup dynamics with the reach, the reputation, the expertise of established nonprofits. And two examples of the sorts of work that's going on. First is working with community businesses to understand how they can create community tech. And a defining characteristic of community tech is that those who are impacted by the use of technology should own the technology or be involved in shaping it. So we're working with about 40 community businesses across the UK at the moment. We're trying to figure out how they can create technologies that are useful to their communities, but that are also owned by the people who are impacted by those technologies. We're also working with a group of networks of charities who provide support to asylum seekers, migrants, and those who are and refugees, trying to ensure that as they arrive in different cities across the UK, they're provided the best support and access to communities and resources. And there, we're not just thinking about community tech, we're thinking about sector-owned technology. So how can we create technologies that are beneficial to individuals, that work well for the charities and community groups that are using it, but that can also then be shared with other charities who are facing similar challenges across the UK. As a particular kind of question we're looking to explore there is how can you take a focus of community tech, where the ownership is by those who are affected by technology, that's built in one place. How can we share those technologies and also share that ownership in a way that ensures those values and kind of those communities have a way of kind of shaping the technology as it's being developed and used. So as a site of learning, some kind of big challenges there around kind of ethics and kind of value-driven technology, but also how can established organizations adopt some of the practices from startups, etc. And then finally, campus is a space where charities come together to go through a whole range of support, whether it's developing kind of skills and understanding and kind of mindsets around how best to use digital, all the way through to helping them go through kind of test-driven approaches, creating prototypes and using them with their communities. So three different kind of very different angles that all lead to that purpose of how can we create greater agency, presence and influence of civil society on technologies that affect us all. Daniel, if you could click through the next two slides, like landing on each one for about 10 seconds and then moving on, please. Across this cashless network, one of the approaches we take is to work in the open, and all the resources that are created are open IP for others to pick up and reuse. That means there are thousands of resources that have been created for and with charities and civil society organizations to help them make sense of digital. It's the largest kind of capacity building program in the UK at the moment, but it also helps kind of focus on very kind of new areas. Oh, wow, that looks horrible. Very new areas of technology where people are exploring. Let's jump to the other one. You can look at that one when you look at the slides afterwards and follow the links. Dan, if you can jump to the next one, please. But within all those resources that try to kind of document existing practice, that try to document kind of emerging practice and share them with other charities, we also have peer groups that are focused on specific challenges. So just yesterday, we had 20 charities coming together who are all exploring the potential of Web3 within their work. They have gone through an early kind of discovery phase, and they're now creating design fictions before then thinking about kind of how to prototype them. 2 weeks ago, we had another peer group that were focused on trying to understand kind of the role of AI in charities. And when we go back to that Digital Leaders Network, there are already 20, 30 charities who are using AI in their charities at the moment. So again, more sites to think, is this kind of ways you can understand what's going on, explore kind of what current practice is, understand the battles that charities are facing to bring about their good, or engage with those who are trying to kind of in an action research approach, trying to do some of this stuff practically to explore how best to bring back digital good. Dan, if you can jump to the next one, please. There are 2 other kind of spaces that I think are worth sharing. So as part of the work at CAST, we try to sit between kind of digital experts and agencies and freelancers, charities and civil society organizations, but also funders, because the way in which funding comes into the sector influences quite significantly the way in which digital can be used by charities and civil society, and therefore how much control, influence, agency and use they have. So one of the other aspects of our work is working directly with grant funders to understand how they can better support civil society organizations in their use of digital. One tool that was launched a few months ago is called Grant Advisor. You can think of it as a TripAdvisor type approach where realistic feedback is given to grant makers so that people can really share their experiences of trying to access funding to do new things, trying to access funding to fund projects and interventions. The challenge there was recognizing there's very little feedback or very few feedback loops that support funders to change their practice. That's trusts and foundations. So trying to kind of plug that gap by creating Grant Advisor is a live project where there are constantly kind of new reviews coming in every day. Yeah, as a site of learning, kind of the data from charities, the data of funders and reviews, mixed with other sorts of kind of insight like the Charities Digital Skills Report, which we helped commission. All that data could be available to anyone who wants to undertake an internship that focuses particularly on the role of civil society in digital good. And then finally, Daniel, on slide 9, one of the challenges with civil society kind of growing their confidence and role and use of digital and really influencing what the digital good might be is the amount of kind of funding that goes into the sector. And because there isn't the funding anywhere near to compete with that in public or in private sectors, one of the main focuses we look at is how can we encourage a culture of reuse. And it's not just individual organizations doing something, but creating things in a way that others can pick up and reuse to speed up their innovation, but also to help kind of test out new approaches and to decrease the cost of those new innovations. And we have now sets of experiences. We have a whole range of tools that charities are picking up and reusing. From one kind of program we ran last year, there were 750 new assets that were created that are now being reused by other charities. And for us, as a way in which we can think about how do we create a digital good, how do we reorganize kind of civil society in new ways around technology. One aspect is how do we bring about that kind of culture of reuse, those new ways of operating, which create collective benefit rather than private benefit. So if we end on the last slide, Daniel, I'll just sum up by saying our focus is on supporting existing charities and civil society organizations to figure out how to make best use of digital, to develop their confidence, to develop their use of digital, and then to influence beyond the sector. We have a huge network of charities and digital partners, and if that's of any use to you as a site for learning, a site to bring your research questions, I'd be delighted for you to get in touch with digitalgood@wearecast.org.uk. Thanks, Roz.
Thanks, Dan. That was fantastic. So many exciting opportunities that are being laid out in front of us. And with an eye on time, there's another opportunity to lay out in front of you as well. This one from Zinc VC. We're lucky to have Harriet Lester and Rachel Carey with us today, so I'll pass over to you, Harriet and Rachel.
Thanks, Roz. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to be here. I'm Rachel Carey. I lead on science and missions for Zinc, which as a focus should hopefully make more sense to you after I've talked through a bit about what we do. So if you move on to the next slide, I'll just give you a brief overview of our general approach and some background. We tend to talk about our work as enabling diverse cohorts of talented individuals to experiment their way to impact at scale on pressing societal problems within our missions. And we do that through science-rich commercial innovation. So that is a mouthful, and I'll talk through each component of that individually so that it hopefully makes more sense. Our focus is on early stage commercial innovation, so building new products and services that are tackling an important problem within society, specifically within one of the missions you can see on screen, but that also are generating commercial returns. and that are kind of scalable and sustainable. That's not to say that that's the best or only way of tackling these problems. That's just the particular focus we have. And we do that through a number of programs that support entrepreneurs and researchers to develop those new innovations from scratch, and to help kind of test those out then in practice. All of our work focuses on those 4 missions you can see on screen. So improving mental and emotional health. We wrapped up a program last year focused specifically on the emotional and mental health of children and young people, for example. Secondly, unlocking new opportunities around the future of work, including things like financial resilience. So we're in the middle of a program right now that looks at financial resilience in midlife and how we can improve it. Thirdly, looking at improving the quality of later life, so healthy aging. And then finally, reducing environmental harms. So we've actually just recently come to the end of our first program focused on climate innovation, and have a number of products and services that have come through from that program. So all of our work is kind of anchored in one of those mission areas. And, you know, as you can probably tell across the board, pretty much all of that is about ensuring that digital technologies are benefiting people in society. So both in terms of the focus they have, the problems they solve, but also the way in which they experiment, test, grow, and operate. Next slide, please. So we do this in a number of ways. We run a number of different types of programs, but the one that's probably most relevant for this context is our Venture Builder. This is where we take cohorts of 60 to 70 people. They're typically mid-career, very diverse range of backgrounds and skill sets. So they might come from academia, from policy, from the corporate world, from technology, from the creative industries, from NGOs. They are all united by their passion for the particular mission we've set for that program. So that might be something to do with financial resilience or later life or mental health or climate. And the way that this works is they come together as a sort of cohort of individuals, and over a 6-month program, they find a co-founder and develop a new product or service from scratch that tackles a particular important problem within that mission. So it's a little bit like the sort of incubator accelerator model that you heard just before, but we start a stage further back than most do, in the sense that we take people on pre-business, pre-team, pre-idea, and the only starting point is basically the mission. So over the 6 months, folks have a chance to sort of explore different problem areas, do research, and ultimately develop and test new ideas. We do this in a very kind of research-led way, so making sure that we're drawing on published evidence and data, and also generating new research, new knowledge in a way that's beneficial and advancing knowledge of those mission areas. And we end up often with quite a lot of researchers and scientists in the cohorts themselves as well. So we're kind of problem-led in the way that we do this, but all of our products and services are tech-enabled. So we're interested in technology as a way to achieve scale of impact on these problems. Next slide, please. Just to flag one other program that we run, which is a bit different, is our Healthy Aging Catalyst. No relation to the Catalyst program you heard about just before. There's quite a lot of programs by the name of Catalyst. This one is run by UKRI in collaboration with Zinc, and it supports academic teams to translate their research in healthy aging into a product or service or innovation. So we've been working with 80 academic teams to do this over the last few years. This is all focused on healthy aging, and we're just launching now a new accelerator program for some of the previous award holders. So just to say, I think what unites this is the focus on sort of generating products and services and innovations that can achieve impact at scale on these mission areas that we've outlined. And the starting point for that is either a sort of entrepreneur who's joining our venture builder, or in this case, an academic who has some research that they'd like to translate. So those are the kinds of programs that we run. Next slide, please. Just to give you a few examples of some of our startups, these are largely on our website. There's quite a lot of them that are focused on health, so digital health, health tech. Most are software based, a couple are hardware. So Tonus, for example, are developing a hardware solution that helps with knee mobility. They've got a kind of smart exoskeleton embedded into clothing that helps with knee mobility. Vera are supporting women through menopause. Belvie are looking at a new approach to social care that prioritizes the well-being of the worker. Ride Tandem are looking at tackling transport poverty in small towns and rural areas. Beanbag are looking to support young people with recovery from eating disorders. And there's a whole range of others that I won't go into, but you can have a look maybe in your own time. Next slide, please. So just to talk through how we approach these kinds of internships, over the last few years, we've been running what we call innovation internships for PhD students who are interested in this world of early stage startup companies and want to get some experience in that space. Our approach has been to sort of take students on and match them to one or more of our companies that have come through our Venture Builder program, and kind of try to carve out a project that aligns with their skills and interests, but also delivers value to the startup. And we've found from having done this that it's hugely beneficial to our startups who tend to have very, very small teams and are at a really critical stage in their development. And it also provides for students, I think, a different type of industry experience. So working in much earlier stage, smaller teams than maybe a kind of bigger corporate environment would offer. Next slide, please. So just to give a kind of flavor, we've worked with a range of different universities and disciplinary areas. We've matched students to one or two of our startups for a 3-month placement. So previously we've done this as either 1 3-month placement or 2 6-week placements. And we've kind of supported those students through the journey as much as we can as a team. So checking in and making sure that things are going well for both the venture and the student. And our in-house research team is almost exclusively ex-academics who have PhDs and have kind of been through the journey. Next slide, please. So for this DGN internships scheme, we're open to all disciplines and interests, but your expertise or at least your interests need to align with one of those mission areas that we focus on. So again, those are all pretty broad and there's lots of areas within them that you might be interested in, but there has to be a kind of clear link. And then I think there's just something about this being the kind of environment that you're interested in, which is not going to be for everyone. I think it's likely to be probably a bit less structured, less formal than some other placements might offer. But that sort of early, slightly chaotic stage does give you a good flavor, I think, of what that phase of innovation looks like. It's difficult to predict this far ahead of time exactly what the projects within a particular startup might look like. But previous students have done things like user research, so qualitative or quantitative research, data analysis, literature reviewing, and also worked on more general tasks related to the product development and business development, which I think they've been kind of keen to get that exposure to as well. And as I said, this is sort of tends to be quite fast-paced, pretty hands-on and varied, and quite team-based. So they're usually pretty small teams, which means I think from what we've heard from students, they tend to feel like they're able to really kind of contribute to the direction of the venture and the decisions that are being made, which should feel kind of rewarding, hopefully. And I think it's also an opportunity to work in a genuinely very multidisciplinary environment, because you will be surrounded by people from usually quite different backgrounds to yours. And that's probably the case for most placements. I think it's one of the things these types of internships offer, is that chance to really work with people from outside of your own kind of comfort zone or disciplinary area. So we're really pleased and keen to be supporting these again in this new form through this network, and pleased to be able to have conversations with students who are interested. You can have a look at particular companies you might want to work with. Or you could just reach out and say, look, I'm interested in mental health, or I'm interested in climate. Here's my background, and we could have a kind of broader conversation. So up to you how you approach it, but you'll have our details. So please do get in touch if you're interested. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That's amazing. I feel like we're sat on a whole range of really exciting opportunities here for interns who want to apply through this network internship scheme. I'm conscious of time, and we did say we'd have a short break. That's been factored into this. So I think it's important to allow that, because people may have planned around it. So let's meet back here in 5 minutes time. So we'll start on the dot at 5 to 11, and we'll hear from our internship speakers as well. So thank you everybody for your time. See you in 5 minutes. Hi everybody, it's 5-2, so we'll get started again. Thank you everybody who's stuck with us. Just to bear in mind that this webinar is being recorded as well, so that will be a resource for people to revisit and for others to watch as well and to learn more about the internship scheme. So far we've heard from our fantastic organisations that we're working with. That's Zinc VC, BBC R&D and CAST. Those are three of the organisations that you could work with as an intern, but importantly they aren't the only ones. There are other organisations you could work with. If you locate them and they're of interest to you, you could nominate them as an organisation. Obviously that would require you to locate and engage that organisation yourself. But as our fantastic speakers have already explained, these organisations are open to having conversations with you to see whether they would be kind of valuable sites for you to do your internship and to gain that experience. So we're really fortunate as well, because I think it's absolutely vital that as well as hearing from organisations, we hear from the folks who actually do the internships themselves. So what we have today are three people in a little panel, internship reflection speakers who have all undertaken an internship in recent times or actually are undertaking them as we speak. And I think they've got really valuable insights into precisely what it's like to do an internship, where some of the challenges are, the opportunities are, and why it might actually be valuable. I think hearing from folks like this really gives a sense of where the value lies in an internship for the individual undertaking it. And so first of all, out of the three speakers we've got the fortune of hearing from today is David Cohen. David, I'll pass over to you. I think you've actually got some slides as well. So Daniel, if you're all right to click on to the next one. David, I'll mute myself and hand over the mic to you.
Thanks very much, Roz. Hi, everyone. My name is David. I'm a third-year PhD student at the University of Nottingham. Daniel, do you mind if we just go to the next slide? I carried out my internship with Zinc for 3 months, and it was a hugely rewarding experience for me. As I mentioned, third-year PhD student at Nottingham. I have a background in biochemistry, and my PhD project is focused on using MRI or magnetic resonance imaging to image inflammation. I always had a sort of interest in innovation and startups and commercializing research. And in my fourth year at university, I had an idea to sort of commercialize some of my research, and that kind of really kick-started, I guess, my passion for innovation. Next slide, please. So I, as I mentioned, joined Zinc on a 3-month placement. Zinc is, as Rachel mentioned, a VC, but with a mission-focused approach. And I essentially was placed with 2 separate ventures, one that was slightly further down the timeline called Tangent, and another one that was slightly earlier stage called Sterling Biomachines. And essentially I spent 6 weeks with both of these companies, both with 2 founders each. And it was really highly rewarding for me to sort of learn from these really sort of innovative people. And essentially what Tangent do is that they are a job referral platform with the aim of democratizing job referrals. So they had a sort of goal of creating a space for people who would otherwise not have the network to essentially get referred into tech jobs. And it was really sort of rewarding working with them. I saw how they sort of conducted their fundraising round, how they were sort of going around trying to sort of, I guess, raise money for what they wanted to achieve. They were speaking with clients, with customers, and I kind of got stuck in with the research around that. Coming from a biochemistry background, it's very different to what I've done before, but I felt very valued as a PhD student, having the transferable skills that you can kind of sort of apply to the commercial world. So with Tangent, I essentially tried to sort of take the sort of more techie approach, looking at how we can sort of implement AI, but then also sort of just general, I guess, sort of researchy type skills to try and improve how they were going about engaging with their community. The second venture that I worked with was Sterling Biomachines, and as I mentioned, they are a lot earlier on. They have just sort of secured grant funding, and we're in the accelerate phase for Zinc. Slightly different company based within the environment mission, and essentially they were trying to design scalable bioreactors. And what was really interesting for me is that I got to take part in the design, prototype testing, sort of financial research, intellectual property research, experimental planning, and sort of forming partnerships with other research organizations. And what I found really valuable from working with these two ventures is that being a PhD student, you're very specialized, but it might be quite sort of difficult to determine what you want to do after you finished your PhD. And through working with Zinc and these two ventures, it's really sort of given me a broader outlook on what I can do as a PhD student, and that you don't have to be a complete specialist, and you can become a bit more of a generalist. And I think that those in industry really do value the sort of the research minds that PhDs have, and if you can sort of apply those transferable skills, it's very valuable. Next slide, please, Daniel. So just quickly on the application process, the application for Zinc was one of the best I've had applying for a job. It was extremely quick. I had back within a week. It sort of split across 3 different stages. One where you submit your CV and a cover letter. I then had a one-way interview where I recorded myself. It was a bit awkward, but definitely something new to try. I know a lot of companies are doing something similar. And then I had a 45-minute interview with Rachel, who's on this call as well. But it was actually kind of a rewarding experience to do the interview as well, because it was more of a conversation, and I sort of got to talk through my interests and my research, and how I think I can sort of apply my expertise to VC work. And so essentially this is just one slide from my 45-minute interview. But yeah, next slide, please. So one of the questions that I had was, what is it like sort of putting your research on hold? And actually part of my funding arrangement is that I have to do an internship for 3 months. I continued to sort of receive my stipend payments and had travel expenses covered, but it was nowhere near as generous as what the ESRC are offering of £6,000. So that's really a good deal. I really wanted to sort of like take the opportunity to try something new. As a lot of you guys are PhD students might know, doing research for 3 years, as I had been doing, was great, but I really felt like I needed a bit of a refresher, and so it was really nice to sort of take a break and do something completely new. And I decided to take my placements after I got to sort of key breakthroughs in my research. So it was nice to come back to something that was actually working. But yeah, next slides, please, Daniel. So just some findings that I had before the placement. I kind of wanted to test out what potential jobs I could do. I wanted to find out what works for me if I enjoy a job. I knew I was pretty sort of certain that I didn't want to go into academia. And so I just kind of wanted to test what industry is like versus academia, what startups are like versus sort of established companies, and what venture capital is really like. And I think it's safe to say, I finished my placement last week, but it's safe to say that I felt really valued as a PhD working for Zinc. People always ask you sort of different questions that you can sort of really contribute to as both a specialist and a generalist. I had sort of more future sort of clarity for a career. So I have a better idea of what I want to do after my PhD. I definitely felt more confident, and just having sort of that experience, I guess, really sort of yeah, it makes you feel valued as a researcher, which you might not necessarily have in academia. But then also, yeah, the cadence and speed of VC work is much it's chaotic at times, so it's much more interesting and fast paced. Whereas I find, at least with sort of biological research, it can take a week or if not months to get anything sort of significant done. But yeah, with VC, it's much faster. Next slide, please. So things I'd wish I'd known before starting. It's absolutely okay if you're not an expert. I know that's quite a difficult thing for a PhD to not be an expert, but sort of go and ask as many questions as you can, because you're surrounded by people who know a ton of stuff, and they are just super keen to talk about what they're doing and to sort of share knowledge. As I mentioned, the pace of bench work is faster than research. It's exciting. New things happen all the time. People pivot, people change their ideas. So that's really good. If you like that sort of thing as well. So, but also you're sort of valued as a PhD, and founders really value that skill set that you'll have that's transferable to innovation. So yeah, thanks very much. If you guys have any questions, I'm on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out, and I'll endeavour to get back to you.
Thanks so much, David. That's fantastic. It sounds like you have had a great time on that internship. Really pleased for you. I should have mentioned as well that although these guys haven't applied through this specific internship scheme, they are, I said they've got fantastic experience that they can bring to bear in this conversation. Some of the specifics, for example, the process that David went through and the funding that David was given, as he mentioned, is slightly different to this. So do be sure to look at the Digital Good Network website to learn more about the specific amount that we're offering and the process that we would require you to go through. So we're fortunate now that we've got a couple of other speakers that tell us about their experiences doing an internship. And our next speaker is Auster Simkut. So I'll pass over to you, Auster. If you can turn on your mic, I'll turn off mine.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Auster. I'm a PhD student at the University of Edinburgh. I'm almost at the end of my PhD. I have until November to finish it. And during my PhD, I managed to do 2 internships, not even 1. So I really have some insights to share about the benefits and challenges. Maybe the application process Strauss mentioned was quite different for me, but for sure, I can share some insights here. So when I started my PhD, the COVID started as well. So I really missed out on a big part of the possibilities of networking, creating potential collaborations, learning from other people. My PhD was mainly spent inside my room in front of the computer. So when I got an opportunity to do internship, I was really excited about these factors, just working surrounded by people. So my first internship was the BBC R&D Ria talk today, and I was very fortunate to get this internship because I'm funded by the BBC, so it was a different kind of application route for me. But nevertheless, it was an amazing experience. And as Ria mentioned, it's important to find a topic that you could both benefit from. So in my case, my PhD is focusing on the explainable artificial intelligence, but at that point was of interest to BBC. They wanted my expertise. They wanted to learn more about explainability, fair machine learning. And from my perspective, I really wanted to learn more about how media experts are using different tools, how media experts are using machine learning or AI at their work and how they understand it. I wanted to see it firsthand. So that was an amazing opportunity to actually get almost infiltrated into the environment and talk to these people. So one of the main benefits I got is the huge enrichment from my PhD. So when I chose this internship, I got this opportunity to actually do something that's really close to my PhD and enrich my thesis, enrich my PhD process. Another aspect I got out of it is learning about new methods. So if you're searching for the internship opportunities, I would highly recommend to think about what you need to learn, what you could learn, but you maybe don't have skills of yet. You didn't have an opportunity to gain certain skills during the undergrad, postgrad studies. For me, it was design workshops. So research method of design workshops. I never had an opportunity to learn it in any of my previous studies. And this was an important method for my PhD. And in this internship, I had a chance to actually get immersed into the environment where the workshops are everyday work for some people. So I had an opportunity to work with experts and professionals who actually conduct workshops, have been doing workshops, organizing these workshops for years. So I was able to observe that and learn not from lectures, not from slides, but actually from immediately doing it, which is a completely different experience and really helped me to learn a lot about this method in particular. And another big aspect was that working doing an internship in an organization, you can actually conduct research with the people working in that organization. So for me, I conducted workshops with UX designers, so interface designers that were there, readily available, happy to help me. So always think of also how can you benefit in that perspective. Another big aspect for me was networking opportunities. So being able to work with professionals, getting outside of the academia and going into industry, created this huge potential for actually making new connections. And what I found doing the internship in the BBC R&D is that people are really keen to help you to find connections that could really help you, that could be relevant to you. So never get intimidated by someone's expertise, someone's seniority. Don't be shy and ask questions. Show your curiosity, show your strength. Get noticed and get talking to people. Ask questions. You might actually open doors for your future. Maybe you'll be coming back to this organization after your PhD. So don't be shy to make connections. My big advice, use that opportunity. People are really happy to help and collaborate and give you knowledge if you're keen and if you're curious. So definitely use that opportunity. In terms of the challenges, I think one of the challenges was one of the big opportunities. So when I started conducting these workshops with experts, these were the very first design workshops I've ever conducted. And I was immediately working with these experts. So I got quite intimidated and overwhelmed. Instead of trying to learn from the experiences, instead of trying to learn from the experts, I got this complete imposter syndrome and feeling like, oh, I can't do this. But actually that was a bad approach. Just ask for feedback, learn, and think about it as an incredible opportunity to learn from these people who've been doing this for many years. Don't get overwhelmed or intimidated as I did. Definitely, there's no reason. You're not expected to be an expert. You're still a PhD student. You're still learning, and this internship is part of the learning experience. So my advice is take every opportunity and don't get intimidated or overwhelmed. Ask for feedback. Another huge benefit was that working on your thesis, working on your PhD all the time, being kind of like in this box of just you, maybe a couple other PhD students working on similar projects and your supervisors, you kind of just circle the same ideas over and over again between the same people. But when you go to industry and you get this chance to actually talk to people who work in an organization outside of academia, you get completely new perspective on different aspects. How some of your ideas could actually be used in practice. Can they be used in practice? Maybe that's just something that is not it needs to be maybe rethink, rethought. So that really opened up my kind of like, let me out of this little box and let me think outside of it. Let me see different perspectives, and the perspective of how my research could be useful in practical sense. For example, how can explainability research I'm doing could be useful for media experts such as journalists. So definitely a great experience to open your eyes and see beyond just academic look, because sometimes working in academia, doing the PhD, you forget that there's an actual world outside of it. And internships like these really help you to see beyond, see the actual value of your research, and maybe the questions that you need to ask. So that was my first internship, and it was a brilliant experience and really helped to enrich my PhD, and actually it resulted in a publication at the end. The second internship I'm still working on. So I'm currently working with Microsoft. So I'm doing an internship with Microsoft. That's a different experience. So if you're thinking about working with a different partner, big organization, I would say be prepared for a very fast pace, for a complete change from flexible kind of thinking, writing, doing research at in a stage of your PhD, to a completely fast-paced environment where you have to deliver constantly. Let's say, at least that's my experience in Microsoft, where I really learned productivity. So when I was doing just a PhD before this internship, I tried to be productive in many different ways, the little calendars, little tasks, everything. But the only thing that actually taught me productivity is doing this internship and actually having to do everything, having to deliver it constantly. But it's a brilliant experience. Again, it's a brilliant experience to see actually whether you want to work in the industry after your PhD, because at some point you'll have to make a decision whether you want to stay in academia or want to maybe move to industry. And trying these things and seeing whether that's matching your preferred workflow, it's really important. I think that's what internships are about, really just to test the waters and see that that's for you. Another thing, doing an internship for the big organization, I would say you learn something like not getting attached to your work. When you do PhD, it's like a baby. You work on it constantly. When you do an internship, for example, on my internship in Microsoft, the projects are changing so fast. You might be working on somewhere, and midway it gets changed, and you have to dismiss it and do something new. So it's a new skill to learn to be flexible, to adapt to changes, fast-paced environment. The skill that I think it's also brilliant to have for the future, and will be very helpful for my employment. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Asta. That's fantastic. I feel incredibly inspired by that. It's amazing. Yes, PhDs definitely feel like your baby, and so it's an interesting change of pace. Certainly, hearing both you and David speak. We're really fortunate as well to have a final speaker to tell us about her experience, Aditi Sarana. Aditi, I'll pass over the mic to you as well. You go ahead.
Thanks, Ross. I think, first of all, hello everyone. I guess I have not much to add, since I guess David and Asta did such a great job sort of explaining their the value of the internship and the challenges, etc. So as someone who's actually currently going through the internship, that's incredibly valuable for me as well. So thank you. I guess so, maybe starting from a bit about my PhD and my background. So I am a second year PhD candidate based at Design Informatics in the University of Edinburgh. I'm also a Marie Curie PhD fellow at Good Network. It's a sort of network of, it's a consortium of 15 PhD students, supervisors, academic and non.
Hi, Aditi. Sorry to interrupt. Would you mind just speaking a little bit louder? You're just a little bit quiet. Thank you very much.
No worries. Sorry, that might be some issue with is this better?
Yeah, thank you. If you can just speak loudly, that'd be fantastic. Thanks.
No worries. I'm part of the Decode Network, which is a network of PhD students, supervisors, academic, non-academic partners, and that's essentially where the funder for my PhD. And the purpose of the Decode Network was to understand how can we rethink design and design methodologies, practice, knowledges to steer the digital transformation of society. So look at how technologies are being designed and how can we actually design them in ways that are more valuable to us, more sort of aligned with human values, human rights, etc. So my focus, the focus of my doctoral program, my doctoral studies, is essentially looking at how can I use design methods, participatory design methods particularly, to look at how technologies are governed. Sorry, I'm not sure why you can't hear me. Is that, are you still having problems?
We can hear you, Aditi.
Oh, okay. Sorry. My doctoral studies, the topic that I'm studying essentially is looking at how digital technologies, particularly AI, can be governed, and how can methodologies, human-centered design methodologies, and participatory design methodologies help in democratizing that governance, making it more people-centered, and central to the values and democratic rights that people want within socio-technological systems. So with that as a background, I was introduced to BBC R&D through some initiatives at University of Edinburgh and also through my supervisors. And we had some initial conversations, and I guess I would want to highlight here as well that my funding and my internship process was slightly different because given that my PhD is funded by the EU Horizons program, I'm on a contract which doesn't really allow for interruptions, or you actually have to get a lot of permissions and etc. for the interruption. So the internship process was quite difficult, and I would also give a shout out to Ria here and my supervisors who actually really pushed for it and saw the value in it and really made the case for it with the bigger consortium. So that really allowed me to make the case for this sort of work and also frame it as a case study, frame it as a research study for my work as well. In which case, so going back to how the application process was essentially, the internship conversations were initially had between me and Ria, and then this was sort of brought on to the larger consortium, and this allowed for the BBC R&D to actually be a part of Decode as well. So there were sort of logistical and legal challenges there in terms of how which partner am I allowed to do my PhD with, my internship with, and how to go about that. So just to highlight for people that if you are here, if there's something that you want to do, if there are partners that you want to actually look for, and your current sort of PhD program doesn't allow for it, or there's some frictions, just bring it up with the places where you want to do the PhDs and your supervisors as well, because they really would help and they would push for it. So don't be shy in bringing up those practical aspects. In terms of what I'm doing at the BBC, my background is in essentially design, and I do come from an industry experience. So I just prior to starting my doctoral work, I was working as an experienced designer, looking at how conversational AI systems can be made and designed in ways that serve a sort of a diverse, differently abled communities. And so coming from that experience and into the doctoral work, as something Alistair mentioned as well, that you always find yourself sort of it's you in front of a laptop and trying to sort of parse a lot of abstract theoretical ideas. So doing an internship has been really helpful to actually come out of that and apply that to a practical context. And this has been helpful in terms of, like, again, Auster mentioned that you end up trying out a few ideas, you end up meeting a lot of people who sort of fuel your ideas further and actually give you very good feedback. So as I said, I'm sort of still in the middle of that. So hoping that all of these things, I can get more insight from the internships, and super excited to share those as well later.
Thanks, Aditi, that's brilliant. It sounds really exciting, the work that you're doing at the minute, and you've given a really lovely account of how that sort of dovetails with your own PhD research interest and how you sort of brokered that. So thank you very much indeed. So those are our 3 internship speakers. They've all given us a bit of a sense of what they did when they undertook an internship. Importantly, it wasn't the Digital Good Network internship scheme. We of course would have speakers from that scheme, but this is the first time it's ever run. So we don't have anybody to call upon. So we're really fortunate that those guys have joined us. And it gives us a really nice sense, I think, of the experience of actually undertaking taking the internship themselves. So we've got a bit of time now for questions, and you'll see that we do have the Zoom Q&A function, and we do have a couple of questions in there already. So I will just start to have a little look through those, and if anybody does have any questions for any of the speakers today or specifics about the internship schemes, then please do start putting them in the Zoom Q&A function. We can get to them if we've got time. Brilliant. So we've actually got a question here from FH. If we're accepted onto an internship with another organisation, not the 3 listed, are we happy, who are happy to support us? What's the next step? Is there anything that needs to be sent to them? So if you recall in the brief overview I gave of the scheme at the very start of this webinar, I explained that there were these 2 different options or 2 different routes for you in the first stage of putting together an application. The first of those is absolutely to work with one of these organisations. That could be Zinc VC, who you heard from Rachel. It could be CAST, and you can get in touch with them via Dan, or and Ria spoke for BBC R&D. So those are 3 organisations that have said they're very happy to support interns to develop applications and to work with them if they're within the broad remit of the area. The other route, as I mentioned as well, is that you can work with a different organisation. It does still require the organisation's buy-in though, and that means that they have to say, yeah, we can support you to do the internship properly. It doesn't mean that they have to offer money to pay you for those 3 months period of time, but they do have to say, yeah, we're happy to have this person here to support them and to help them to undertake a discrete package of work of some kind or another that may be more or less specified at this stage, over the next 3 months, that will work for all our organisation, but we as an organisation are also willing to help you as the PhD student to develop your own skill set. So you need to be sure that the organisation is willing to do that before you put the time into the application form. And so for that reason, I absolutely would say that you do indeed need to be in touch with that organisation early to let them know who you are, what your interests are, and all that kind of thing. As Aditi said, you can't be shy about these things. We have to sort of, like, for a lot of us, for me, it's a very unnerving thing, right, to put yourself out there and ask if somebody needs your help. But we've seen today through all of these different organisations that the value that a PhD intern can bring to any kind of organisation is sort of immeasurable. And so I imagine that a lot of people are really keen to support. So you would have to take the initiative to reach out to that organisation, and then they can talk with you about the application. Vitally, there are really important components of the application form, which is the statement from the organisation itself. We've actually got a template for that, so it's not too much work for the organisation to do, but they have to guarantee a few different things, some of them more contractual around health and safety and that kind of thing, but also that they will support you and ensure that you're sort of well supported for that 3-month period and not sort of left on your own. So yeah, you absolutely do need to be in touch with them as early as possible, ideally. So I hope that answers that question. We're really keen to support applicants who are going for these other organisations as well, not just our 3 fantastic organisations who are here. We've got some other questions as well. The internship scheme this year is only open for UK PhD students. By UK PhD students, I mean people who are based at higher education institutes in the UK. So you could be an international student so long as you're based at one of those institutions. And that's partly to do with the infrastructure, the funding infrastructure that we've been able to put in place for this year, which is the first year of the Digital Good Network. Somebody's asked here about funding and how you pause that. Obviously, different people on this call and different people who'll be watching this webinar later will have different sources of funding to actually undertake their PhD, which presents a range of different sort of practical routes for engaging with your funder and with your university about A, whether you can undertake the PhD, and B, figuring out how you actually do it. So if you're funded, for example, by UCRI through the ESRC, and a funder like the ESRC, as long as you're making good progress and you're meeting your good progression points clearly, it's likely that they will be supportive of you taking a leave of absence to undertake an internship. That's being highly encouraged in ESRC. As David mentioned, different UCRI funders actually already embed it into their PhD programs. So I imagine that there will be a lot of encouragement for you to participate in an internship program if you're UCRI funded. And as I say, you're meeting all those important progression points to time and people are happy with your PhD progress. If you have a different funder that we're perhaps not as familiar with, then it's important to start those conversations early as well, because as well as offering a statement from your host organization that says they're happy to support you, we'll also need a statement that clarifies that you can guarantee you can take that 3-month period of leave so that you can pause your studies, as Alistair called it, that box of thinking that you're importantly engaged in, and start to expose yourself to these other ways of working. We need you to be able to take that leave of absence. Importantly, when funding pauses, this is a funded opportunity. So although funding might pause for the PhD, the internship funding would then kick in. So I hope that that makes sense to the person who asked that question. If there are any more specific questions about that, it's always worth reaching out to your own institution's PGR finance department, who will have tons of experience in supporting PhD students across their faculties to undertake internships. Somebody else has asked here about application dates. So this year it is absolutely the end of September. September the 29th is the deadline for applications this year. Is it likely to be the same every year? Without being able to sort of predict the future, I imagine it will be around that same time. But that is just for the application. As has been mentioned here by Ruth, who's answered the question written down, the period of the internship would happen at any point in the following calendar year. So at any point in 2024 that works well for you, that you've agreed with your supervisor would work well, for you to pause the PhD, for the organisation you work with as well, for them to say, yeah, this will be a good time to have you, depending upon which organisation you work with. So for example, at Zinc VC, because they run a specific internship scheme that may run at certain parts of the year, you might need to kind of figure out with them precisely when in the year you take it, but you'll have to do that with any host organisation. So hopefully that answers most of the questions that have already come in, and I can see some other questions starting to come in as well. So Dee Goddard, who is our who's one of our colleagues who works in the network, is actually at the summer school, and so there's a question that's come from them. So feel free to pop your mic on, Dee, and get whoever's there to ask their question. You can hear it.
Rose, can you hear us?
Just about, Helen.
So do you want to just speak up towards that mic there? You should be able to.
I guess Rose can't see me, but actually, I got a question that is it okay that the organization I want to work for is outside the UK? Like, I am a student based in UK institution, but what if the NGO I want to work for is based in Germany? Is this possible?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So I'll have to check on the guidelines on the website. As far as I'm aware, right, the way that this works is that the funding that we provide goes to the university that you're based at, for them then to facilitate sending the money onto you as the student who works at that, who is a student at that university. So the funding arrangement itself is for that. If you can articulate a way in which the project or the work that you do with that organization can map on to the Digital Good Network and all of these other aspects, then I don't see any reason specifically why you wouldn't be able to do that. It would be a question of things like, how do you arrange travel and that kind of thing? Would you be working hybrid? Would you be working specifically at home? Would you need to go over there? Because all of those different practicalities would need to factor in to whether you'd have enough money to undertake that internship, because we can't go over that £6,000 budget. We've got Ruth on the call with us, so if Ruth has anything else to add to that, she might be able to add some more specificities to it. She can type that into the chat in the Q&A function. But as far as I understand, that should be all right. If you've got any specific questions about that, then you can always send them to our Digital Good Network email address as well. I hope that's clear and that you guys can hear me back down in the summer school, okay? Ruth's got nothing to add, so it looks as though we're in the clear on that one, and I've said the right thing, so that's positive. So we haven't got any questions currently, and I suspect that a lot of the people who are engaging with this webinar are doing so after the fact. So if you do have questions, as I say, do drop an email. But I did actually have a few different questions that I think might be helpful for framing some of the work that you guys might do in your own internship should you apply. And the first of those questions, I suppose, is actually for BBC and for Zinc. Because you both have a lot of experience, maybe Ria, you first, could you give us a sense of the directions of travel for people who've done internships with you after you've actually sent them on their way after they've completed their internship?
Yeah, sure. It's again, it's a bit of a mixed bag. We've had interns that have gone on and had a career in academia afterwards. So we had a research intern from Nottingham University a number of years ago. So her PhD was sort of aligned with the BBC at the time, and she did a 3-month placement. And after that has gone on to get a postdoc position. Now she's an associate lecturer. And one of the nice things actually is we continue to have relationships well beyond that internship. So one of the things that internship did was facilitate knowledge exchange between the sort of university and the department, and build those sorts of relationships up with researchers that have sustained themselves since. So that's one example. On the other side of that, we had an intern from Newcastle University in the last couple of years who came on board with us for, I think, 3 months to look at how we design for good data interactions, very much aligned with his PhD at the time. And as of last month, I learned that he's actually joined the BBC in the UX department. So he's actually come full circle after finishing his PhD and has come back to work in industry and to do more of this sort of work. So I think we've got examples from both sides of that spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that because some of the narrative about doing an internship is about sort of jumping the ship from academia, but a lot of the time it sounds as though some of the people who've done internships with you actually, it's actually galvanized their desire to stay in academia, but to be more collaborative in spirit.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that it does is also surface up where the connections are between your research and your interests and work that's actually happening and going on in industry, which you may not be aware of because from the outside it's hard to know. But I think especially in that second case, after coming into the organisation and seeing that there was, it wasn't just a case of choosing between academia or industry, it was actually an instance of where their interest and their research aligned with things that were going on, and then that sort of paved the way for taking on a role afterwards.
Absolutely, thanks, Ria. I think I'll direct the same question over to Zinc. I know we've got Harriet and Rachel on the call, so either of you, like, what kinds of things have your interns gone on to do, Rachel?
Yeah, so the first time we ran a kind of proper scheme around this was last year, so it's probably too soon to say. A lot of them are still finishing their PhD. A lot of them have maintained some kind of a relationship with the startup they worked with. I think certainly there's some of our startups that wish the PhD student was sooner to finishing their PhD, with a view to, continuing that relationship in some way more formally. We did also host a PhD student a few years earlier, outside of the kind of programs we now run. And she, after she finished her PhD, ended up coming to work for Zinc for a little while. I think from our perspective, just building on what you said, it's not about necessarily building a pipeline of researchers who then want to come and work in startups. It's more about trying to increase visibility of what this world looks like and what jobs in this world look like, even if the result is that you come to the conclusion you don't want to go near it again and you want to stay in academia or go to a different setting. At least you know, and at least there's more clarity about what that involves, because I think it's a particular type of world that is a bit opaque if you're not kind of familiar with it. So from our side, it's kind of increasing visibility of the options to help folks make an informed decision.
Absolutely, and actually, I wish I'd had that sort of scope when I was doing my PhD. Invaluable sort of knowledge. I think Alistair, you gave a really nice account of kind of moving outside of the box and opening doors for the future, I think you called it. Thank you, Rachel, that's really helpful. And see, we've got another question from the summer school, so I'll actually just jump back off the mic and hand it over to whoever's got that question. Over to you.
Hi, I've just got a question about the internship hosts and whether they could be public sector organisations like the NHS or academy trusts, libraries, like any of those organisations, if that's possible.
I think if there is a pathway for people to have internships in those organisations already, and there likely already are in most of the ones that you've described there, then it probably wouldn't be a problem. The main issue would be ensuring that the organisation has resource to support you through that, and that they're happy that they can do that. So whether they've got the infrastructure in place, whether there are staff that can give enough time to be able to facilitate making sure you have a good and productive internship experience. So for example, if you're working in an organisation where people are already quite strapped for time, it could be challenging to get an organisation to come on board. That said, you know, I'm imagining that there is, again, a huge amount of appetite, particularly in the public sector, to engage PhD interns in the work that they're doing. So I see absolutely no reason why on the face of it you wouldn't be able to do that. Of course, the challenge is then brokering the opportunity with the organisation. So what I would suggest in response to that question is, if you've got a particular organisation in mind, is to reach out to them early. Give them a sense of what it is you are an expert in, the kinds of ways that you think you could perhaps dovetail with the work that they do at their organisation, and telling them what kinds of things, and being frank about it, the kinds of things that an organisation would need to do to be able to support you. And so if you go on the DGN website, we have a list of resources there for like how to run an internship well and ethically and properly as an organisation. Things like, for example, being able to offer a reference letter and meeting regularly with the intern. And so if any organisation can provide that, and that you can map the work you want to do in the round onto the Digital Good Network, then there's no reason why you wouldn't be able to name them as a host. But obviously you'd need to have their buy-in from the get-go. I hope that makes sense. Just having a look here. Yeah, Ruth also put some link there that has a link to those resources so that you can take a look at those in your own time. We've got a little bit of time left, and I'm not seeing any questions from the audience. So see,
Roz,
yeah, Ruth,
there was just one question that I typed an answer to that it might be worth just sort of going over. Someone was asking about, how does the sort of hybrid commuting element work? For example, if you're based in the Midlands and the placement is in the South, how might that look? So I've typed an answer that's from our FAQs, but I thought it might be just useful to touch on that one.
Thanks, Ruth. That's really helpful. Yes, so a lot of people will be asking, you know, does it have to be face-to-face, the internship? You know, in the days post or peri-COVID, it's never really gone away. So let's say peri-COVID, we're in a world now where people often do work from home, or they may go into work every day. With this, we can fund you for 3 months, £6,000, and that £6,000 has to cover you surviving, eating, living, and if needs be, travelling. Now, it might be that one of the organisations you work with can support you financially to get you to where you need to be for that internship. There's a good likelihood that they won't be able to, because obviously resources are tight cross-sectorally. So yes, it could be hybrid. Yes, it could be face-to-face. Yes, it could be entirely working from home. That is the kind of conversation that you'd need to have relatively early with the organisation you want to work with. Some of these, so Zinc, for example, it has various different things that it does with its interns. So there might be some face-to-face things where you meet other folks. You need to factor those kinds of things into that 3-month period as well. But importantly, what you need to be able to say in your application is that this format that I've selected to undertake my internship with, let's say hybrid, working from home most of the time and going down to the organisation in, realistically, let's say in London, and I'm up in Sheffield once a month, that works well for what I want to do, because a lot of the stuff I'll need to do doesn't require me to be there physically. But importantly, the organisation will support me and give me desk space, for example, for the day that I'm down there each month. So it's about articulating why the format that you think is suitable will actually help you to deliver the work package that you're proposing as part of your internship. So we're not, as I said, being prescriptive. We're trying to be really clear about the fact that we're being nice and broad here, allowing you to do a range of different activities that map onto organisations' needs and the network's priority areas as well. So I hope that makes sense as well as a response to that question. Ria, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in those early conversations with organisations, I think that's a really important point. You know, ask them about their ways of working and what could work well. Like, you know, in our case, we've got sort of bases up and down the country. So there is, you know, different office spaces, and we're set up to work in a hybrid way. But again, it varies from team to team and division to division. So I think that's a good conversation to have early on, just to get a sense of the environment that you're going into, how they're working, and how it could work in the context of any sort of proposed internship that you put forward.
Yeah, thanks, Ria. And I think that probably then maps back onto that question earlier about going with international organisations that perhaps don't have a base in the UK. We do note in the FAQ that face-to-face engagement can be really important in facilitating, you know, as Alf was saying, and as David was saying as well, kind of broadening your perspective, looking outside the PhD project, and being able to expose yourselves to those different spaces and places can be really important. And just a small amount of face-to-face can really enable that. So I'm conscious of time, and I'm afraid we haven't been able to get lots of questions back to our panel, but I'm positive that everybody that's presented today has offered a really helpful set of information that will help our audience today, but also our future audiences in this world of webinars to learn more about the internship process, and I'm sure encourage them to apply. So I will just make a note that we do actually have a keynote this afternoon. Dr. Łukasz Schultz from the University of Manchester is going to be presenting work that he's been engaged in over the last couple of years that relates to the Digital Good Network. It is a public lecture, so you can actually sign up through the Eventbrite to get the URL to that if you're not in Sheffield. Of course, if you're in Sheffield and have an hour and a half free this afternoon, then do come along as well. I'll just say really a massive thank you to our entire group of speakers today, to our organisers behind the scenes as well, Daniel, Dee and Ruth, and a great thank you to our audience too for being here and spending time with us. Have a lovely rest of the day, everybody.